All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to considerations for moving from a paper napkin design to commercialization. My name is Nicole Owens and I'm the Director of Marketing Communications for MassMedic. If you're not familiar with MassMedic, we are a medical device trade association for New England, and we work to bolster our ecosystem through connection, education, awareness, and advocacy. So just a real quick housekeeping note, we are going to have ample time for Q&A. So please feel free to use the Q&A function and the chat function at the bottom of the screen. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator for this program. Amy Jerry is the Market Development Manager for Nissha Medical Technologies. Welcome, Amy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. Also, thank you to MassMedic for hosting us today. We are new to the organization, so we're excited to be here. And once again, thank you for everyone for joining us to further discuss the considerations for moving from a paper napkin design to commercialization. I am the Market Development Manager for Nissha Medical Technologies, and I'll be fielding all of the Q&A at the end of our presentation. So as Nicole said, please do use the Q&A and chat function within the Zoom webinar. We will also be sending out a copy of this presentation along with our contact information for all additional follow-up. So I will hand it over now to our presenters.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Mark DeBishop. I am Senior Director of Technical Business Development, which is kind of a fancy way of saying that I am involved in early stage design services here at Nissha. Prior to joining Nissha, I had a small family-owned company called Sequel Special Products. Some of you may know me from there. And at Sequel Special Products, I was the VP of Operations, so I got to see quite a bit through the entire process of medical device design and manufacturing. One in particular was that when we design something, we do it so that someone in the world can manufacture it.
Thank you, Mark. David Shea here, Business Development Manager for Nissha. I recently joined here a few months ago. Before that, I spent about the last 25 years working for either Loctite in the medical device space, and the last 10 Avient, which is formerly known as PolyOne. Our goal here today is to be about 20 to 25 minutes with our presentation, have some Q&A at the end, and then I know everybody's time is very valuable and plan on getting everybody off the phone, off of this in about 30 minutes. So, what we'd like to chat about today is these considerations, right? Mark spent a lot of his time in that, and I have as well, working on what we consider to be, fun programs, right? When you take something from that true napkin sketch and get it all the way to a scaled up manufacturable device and watch our customers succeed. Mark, in your opinion, in the years you've been doing this, what are really some of the key points to discuss when a program is launched successfully?
So, Dave, I think it's most important that you bring in the correct team. So match the customer with their requirements with a broad experience level. Also match the resources to what your customer is looking to design.
Yep.
Have design-oriented program management. I think that's important. Customer or collaboration between our customers or whoever you choose as a design firm and the customer. Over communicate, I think, is important. Customer inputs. I can't stress enough about the customer inputs and how important that is. If the customer doesn't know what they need, then it's going to be hard for us to help them with design. And you're going to want to pick a design firm that is very familiar with risk management, hazard analysis, and that type of thing. And looking at this slide, DFX is a widely used term, DFM, DFU. You really need to start out with that in mind when you're doing a design project. That will lead into a cost-effective device, hopefully. Costs are very challenging right now. It's very competitive out in the design field. It's also competitive for our customers with their customers in the end. Quality is, you just can't stress enough about quality. It's a given in our field. We're putting devices into people's bodies. Zero defects need to be taken into consideration when you're designing a product. Process defects, you don't want to have process defects or performance defects. And then you also need to have scale in mind when designing a device.
Yeah, I know one thing for sure, when I spent years at Loctite, adhesives were a challenge when you talk scale, right? It was easy to design two substrates being bonded with adhesive, but then taking that and scaling it, and a lot of times that landed in the hands of the manufacturing team, manufacturing engineers, because it wasn't really thought of up front. And it's key to really think of all those things up in the beginning of the design, that's for sure.
So, Dave, that's a perfect example. When designing, you may want to think about press fits or ultrasonic welding to remove glue. Glue has its specialties, and it's necessary. And a lot of times it's there in the beginning to accelerate things, but in the end, it may cause all kinds of issues.
With the scale, yeah, excellent. So when we take all of these things these considerations into mind, when a customer's out there looking for that ideal design partner, Mark, what do you really think are the important things that people need to be looking for?
So I think a design firm that you may want to employ has a broad level of experience, and also has the correct experience for that device. If you're developing a laparoscopic device, does that team have laparoscopic experience? Do they have the clinical experience? Do they have, the tools that they need?
Yeah.
Those are important considerations. The correct number of resources. Do they have the team to be able to support that project? And program management. I can't stress enough about program management. You really need a team, a coach for that team to keep everybody in a line, because engineers can go off on tangents, as we know.
Absolutely. One thing you mentioned quickly is that broad level of experience, which I think we kind of mentioned here on this slide with the multiple fields of experience. Looking at a company who only manufactures one type of device, they're looking at this design in a certain level of experience and knowledge. When you work with a design firm, you're looking for somebody that, has experience working with many devices so they can pull off of each other, right?
Right. I mean, sometimes in design, you can get pigeonholed if you're only working on certain aspects of a device. In our case, we work on many devices: orthopedic, laparoscopic, endoscopic, and what you learn over here can be applied over here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's invaluable.
To pick a couple of these other things, Mark, just to really kind of dig into a little bit, a lot of companies will only want to work on certain type of jobs, whether they're the large ones or the small ones. And I think it's important to have a design company that is flexible enough to work on large and small. Where do you think the value is there?
So I think it's valuable to employ a design firm that works on small numbers, small scopes of work, as well as large. You get more experience that way. You're bringing more design around different types of devices. So a firm that only wants to work on those $2 million projects is missing out.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. So we're willing to work on, or flexible firms willing to do maybe just an FEA on something versus a full device, right? And it's good to have the flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, startup companies sometimes will have a huge device with a long-term engagement, and even large OEMs will have that small 2-3 day FEA, like you said.
Yeah. How about, I know we briefly mentioned on the last one about that project management and that collaboration. A firm with a very collaborative environment, are you referring to just external or both? Or, in your opinion, what's something you're looking for in a firm that's going to be collaborative?
So we're looking for customers that want to be collaborative with us.
Yeah.
Our customers know what they want. We know what we want. And that's the same no matter what design firm you employ. Over communicate. For our example, at our company, we kind of demand that we're collaborative. We need to be collaborative with over communication, essentially. And then internally, a design firm that's going to be desirable for any customer is one that collaborates with internal teams such as quality engineering, materials management, supply chain, and even people on the floor. The people on the floor are going to spend all day, putting things together. They have a lot to add.
I think it's interesting, when you look at Nissha from a big picture, all of our design centers, all 5 of them, are all located in manufacturing facilities so that we can have that collaboration, right?
Exactly. At the end of the day, if you design something that no one can put together or manufacture or scale, what good is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How about, vertical integration? What do you think? I mean, boy, I came from the resin world last year, and supply chain was needless to say, quite challenging. But there's other things to that, right? Where does some of the advantages you see working with somebody who has a best-in-class vertical integration across many different, product lines?
So, I mean, the first thing that I think of is prototyping and DFM. If you have an expertise in metals, for example, and you're vertically integrated there, you're going to have SMEs that know, hey, change this radius and make it easier to make, or something very simple. So prototyping and learning in the beginning has a lot to do with that vertical integration piece. You should be able to reduce your lead time as well, right? Because that vertical integration piece is under your umbrella. Cost, you should be able to save 20 to 30% in cost if you don't have a middleman, and control over the supply chain. Can't stress that enough. I'm sure there's plenty of people on this call who are having issues with supply chain. And if you can control your own destiny with supply chain, it's going to be a benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So, now that we've kind of understood what we think are good partners, I just kind of walk through a couple of case studies here, Mark, where your team has been able to work on a couple applications. And the first one here is something that you worked on for years, and would love you to kind of walk through this process here.
So yeah, this is an example of a rotator cuff repair device in the orthopedic world. Small startup company came to us with a proof of concept, and they decided to, rather than employ their own engineering and their own resources, use us. And so the challenges were large here. This device had a lot of, it actually drives a needle through the bone, and therefore it has a lot of force requirements. And for example, moving from that metal trigger to a plastic trigger, we had to do, analysis using FEA. We had to do a lot of testing. We had to do mold flow. Material selection was important.
It's always a challenge. I came from that space, right? It's always something you got to spend a lot of time on.
Exactly. And the other thing was there were a lot of user steps in this device. And when it was proof of concept, there was an engineer there with a laser pointer telling the doctor, okay, move this lever, pull this trigger, flip that lever. So we had to use our DFM capabilities to also reduce the user steps from 14 down to 8. So usability is always a consideration when you're talking about design.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What's interesting is I look at this device and see the multiple components, many different resins and materials, and the metal. When you designed this device and worked with this company, this was before you were acquired by Nissha. And since then, Nissha has also acquired a metalworking facility with a lot of capabilities. Where do you see that would have changed your, maybe outcome or ability to work on this device if you had that metalworking capability at your fingertips?
So once again, you'd have those SMEs that could supply good DFM recommendations. Might be simple, might be difficult. So producing prototypes and lead time to learn would be reduced quite a bit.
Yeah.
Cost, it's always a consideration, and once again, control over that supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Thank you, Mark. All right, so now we have a second case study we'd like to review, and this one is very different, and there's some different capabilities utilized here that are important to note. So can you walk us through this one?
So this, a lot of people probably have seen a device like this, a laparoscopic stapler, a linear stapler. And the bottom line is that you have to have a perfect staple formation all the time. There's no room for defects when it comes to staple formation. In this case, you know, if you're stapling on a bowel, you're going to potentially have a leak if you have an improper staple formation. So what we did here was we took an FEA simulation and we predicted what the tools needed to be like and to produce a good staple formation. And the graph on the right shows the actual FEA versus the actual compression force of the staple formation. And you can see that those, you know, they line up pretty good right on top of each other for the most part. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, the far left is a staple formation that you want to see versus, you know, some of the other ones that you sometimes see on your papers, you know.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, one thing important, you know, startup company, right? I'm sure there was limited funding and resources. You know, looking at a device like this and doing the FEA, where do you ballpark think, you know, it could potentially have saved in time and money instead of doing that multiple iteration process?
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe $100,000 in you know, trial and error and developing anvils and different pockets and you know, and lead time. Sometimes lead time is even worth more than money.
Yeah, right.
A lot of people don't have a lot of time. So you take those things in consideration when you're doing an FEA.
All right, excellent. Thank you. You know, one thing that I think that has you know, shown itself is that a collaborative environment and really getting to work with your customers and understand what their needs are. And one thing that Nissha has kind of looked at and is trying to help our customers is this idea of, you know, let's kind of walk before we run, right? Let's try to understand if it's a good fit for our companies to work together.
Right.
Let's see if the device is a good fit for what, you know, the expectations are of the customer. So, you know, we've kind of launched this new program we'd like to call our accelerator program, where it's really interesting to work with our customers, almost kind of date before you get married, try to figure out what the scope of work is of the device and see if there's a fit, see if it's something where we can provide the value that the customer's looking for, right? On a big picture, and understand. So we've been doing this for a little while now. I'm wondering if you know, have a little bit of experience on some success here and where you think this is valuable.
So I'll bring up a personal analogy here. My youngest son, when he was 8 months old, rather than walk, he just stood up and started running. Well, that produced about 8 black eyes by the time he was 2.
Maybe a couple glue marks.
So this accelerator is the opportunity to get a bunch of engineers in a room, take a look at a device, do a technology download with our customer, and really vet out, you know, what could be done differently, what kind of parts can be eliminated, what can we do with the process. And the end result is a whole list of ideas, maybe some DFM, some cost savings ideas, maybe even some design changes that our customer hadn't thought of, because we're going to take a group of engineers, our whole team, spend a few hours and just brainstorm and come up with ideas. And at the end of this accelerator, what we're going to do is we're going to end up with maybe a bill of material cost of goods to start, and then what we think we can get to, and a budgetary estimate, including assembly process, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and so in our experience, you know, customers might think that is making them go backwards in their process, but what we've seen is you can actually help them get to speed to market faster by doing that walk before you run thing, right? Let's really understand where we are so we eliminate some steps in the back end, right?
Yeah, so through my career, I've learned a long time ago that none of us are as smart as all of us. So the more minds that you put to a device early on, the better it's going to pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you. So really that concludes what our goal was today, to kind of just talk a little bit about design and key aspects of a design firm that you're looking for when you're looking for success. Amy, I'm wondering, how we're looking for, if you see any questions out there or anything that was added to the Q&A.
We do. So first off, Mark, Dave, thank you so much. We do have a few questions and I'm going to jump right in. Our first question, we heard when things are planned out very well and things are going great. What would Mark and Dave say are the top reasons why things do not go right?
Oh, there could be many different things. Funding is a big one, lack of funding, lack of budgets, lack of initial customer inputs.
Project scope creep, right?
Yeah, product specifications, not understanding the product specifications in the beginning. It's a whole host of things, and I think we've probably seen them all. Any design firm that says things don't go awry, probably lying to you. One thing I can say through my experience is 2 weeks into a project, everything changes.
Okay, very good. Another question. So Mark, you talked a lot about over communicating. Why over communicate?
Well, for those of you that are married, it's the same reason. If you over communicate, you're not going to let anything fall through the cracks. Not to say that you have to spend 2 hours a day. You need to have the appropriate amount of communication, but over communicating is not a bad thing in my mind.
Yeah, so a lot of times the program manager might set up a weekly review, right? And make sure that we're going through those stages and getting approvals before we move to the next process, right?
Right.
Because the last thing you want to do is move to the next step in a program without the approval of your customer.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the program management piece. That person on the design side should have some design experience that will be helpful, but that person is going to be the coach, right? He's going to keep the budgets on time and the resources on time, and he's going to hold everything together if he's doing his job correctly.
Okay, very good. Next question. Sometimes customers do not have all of the answers and they heavily depend on a company to help them just to provide value and trust. Can you talk a little bit more about what you guys do to provide that value and trust?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that is important is the experience, right? I mean, we have, what is it? Like 250 years of design experience just within a few of our facilities, and that trust and that experience, it lends itself to being that partner.
Right, and at our company we have somewhere around 600 engineers, including our Nissha partner in Japan. And those folks are material science and R&D folks, and we can tap into them if we need the experience that we don't have on site. But to touch back on what you said, Dave, because we're working in so many different fields, we do have a lot of experience, and we purposely cross-train our people so that they are not pigeonholed in one area of expertise or one device.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, next question. What tools do you recommend to create a feedback loop after the project closure phase?
That's a good question, and I can answer that a bunch of ways. I think that we, once again, over communicate a lot and have design reviews. We sign off in between phases of a project, so our customers are well aware of what's going on along the way. We also use agile stand-ups for our design projects, and we include our customers in that. So once again, over communicate.
And I think on the other side is if that's a program that we are able to own from design through to the manufacturing transfer, if it transfers somewhere internally within one of our own facilities, we really can have our finger on that program as it moves on into years of production, right? And it lets that design team lend, advice or make changes if needed to anywhere in that process.
Absolutely.
And our customers.
Gotcha, very good. No, I think that definitely speaks to, the design team's continuous improvement. All right, next question. Mark, as an engineer, how do you over communicate without over explaining? I find being concise is important when talking with non-technical audiences.
I feel like that question came because I'm over talking here, but I think that's something you learn based on your audience. And I would ask people up front, tell me when I'm too far out there on a level that you don't understand or I'm talking too much. And we're so open and collaborative. We kind of expect that honest communication. So I personally would bring that up in the beginning of a conversation with a customer.
Yeah, it's set expectations, right?
Exactly.
How much do you want to hear from me? How much do you not? What's your expectation?
Although, Dave, I would say that we expect to be collaborative with our customers.
Absolutely.
We almost demand it, really, because it's really part of this success or failure.
Very good. Can you comment on design FMEAs? Why are they so typically painful with little true benefit to the design?
Well, if there's little true benefit, then it's probably not being done correctly. And FMEAs are painful, but it really gets down to the granular nitty-gritty of what you need to pay attention to for risk and hazard analysis and all the above. Once again, we are putting devices into people. There's no room for error. So I would say to engineers that said this is painful, maybe you're not doing it correctly. We do a lot of PFMEAs, DFMEAs, and risk analysis within our company. And there are ways to make it less painful, but I agree. It's a painful process that you need to go through. And if you can tell your audience or your customer or an engineer how important that is, maybe it'll take that painful work out of their vocabulary.
Next question. How do you sell that proactive design work reduces costs down the road?
I would answer that with a lot of minds will make the work quicker, if you will. If you do let's just bring it to a simple term of brainstorming, right? If you have a good group that knows how to brainstorm, for example, all ideas in brainstorming are good until you work on them as a whole, and you might vet some of them out. You might bring some more in. I can see a lot of times when somebody has an idea, it will spur somebody else's idea, and you'll meet in the middle and come up with something completely different. So I'd say getting a lot of minds together in the beginning and doing a real collaborative brainstorm, including your customer and people on the floor and manufacturing folks, is going to save you a lot of time in the end.
Yeah, I've even seen on the materials side, right, where if you don't take the time up front to vet out all the materials you need to use, and is one can be gamma sterilized, one needs to be ETO, and they don't match up, and it could set you back months when you need to make a change to your material 3-4 months down the road, right? It sets you all the way back. So, doing all of that legwork up front, thinking about your end game when you're doing your design can really save a lot of time.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to go to the next question. Does Nissha collaborate with custom injection molders?
Absolutely.
So two things. One, we are vertically integrated with injection molding. We have about 129, 130 presses within our network of Nissha facilities. But then we also do use outside sources. You know, this facility here in Connecticut has, gosh, I don't know how many injection molders within, well, everybody, most of the folks here know in Mass Medic organization. I know we have people here from all over the country, but there's hundreds of molders in New England and we work with a lot of them. And there's a lot of collaboration where we can't do it internally.
Yeah. So I'd answer that with both, internal and external partners.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. Do you find that the customer is concerned about these upfront costs? We have had a few questions on costs. So the specific questions coming in from their work in manufacturing and not being sure that everybody understands how much money this saves down the road as an investment.
Not sure what costs. So you're talking like, are we referring specifically maybe to the accelerator program where there's a cost up front to really understand the program before we ever dive in, do you think? If that's the case, we've shown that spending a few bucks up front to truly understand some of the gaps in the design, some of the challenges in the materials, or some of the challenges you may have in manufacturing, save you money in the end. But I'm not really sure 100%.
And the accelerator, typically what we will do is credit some of that money or all of it back to our customer if we go into production with them. Right. So if we get to that end game where we're producing product, then that upfront cost will get credited back within production.
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, every program is different. Every device is different. Everything is different. So, to really get a true cost, we got to look at what's there, right? The program itself, and please reach out. We'd be happy to talk about that with you.
Awesome. We do have one longer question, so bear with me, but this, I don't want or need a lot of that. I did have a customer ask me for a large amount of money to create this, a grand design plan. And in the end, we weren't on the same page. So that amount of money up front really went out the window. I can tell if I want to work with someone after I give them a back and forth, back of the envelope idea, that they can give me also a back of the envelope time and cost estimate. So that's always a very valuable statement. So I guess if you guys have anything else that you want to collaborate or elaborate on that.
Yeah. So typically we will do early budgetary estimates even before we do an accelerator, if customer would like that, and they'll know what they're getting into. One thing that we do that a lot of design firms don't do is we have an extensive design and development checklist, and even some large OEMs have used this checklist that we have generated over the years to really pinpoint exactly what the customer wants us to do and what they're going to do. So it's known up front exactly what we're going to quote.
Well, I think the important thing there is if we find it's not a fit, whether it's from our side or their side, let's figure that out early.
Right.
So we don't tie up those resources.
Exactly.
And move on, right? Because the best thing we can do for each other is be honest and upfront, and that over communicate and figure out if this is a program we want to collaborate on or not as soon as possible.
Yeah. Got it. Very good. Okay, so the next question is a topic on sustainability. What value is there for Nissha on the topic of sustainability with non-plastics materials, and how important is that now to include optional materials in any of the design discussions?
Well, with all the supply chain issues that are going on right now, optional materials is becoming a very good topic and an important one. Sustainability, I'm not sure what the question is related to sustainability. I'd like to follow up with whoever asked that question and get a better understanding of what they're asking. to better answer that question. But the supply chain issues that we're seeing in multiple materials is an important one for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's something we would want to know from the customer up front. Are you trying to make a sustainable device? And if you are, then we're going to bring in the materials experts and the people that can help us make those decisions up front, right? Nissha, as a corporate, has a very strong stance about where they're going in sustainable culture. If you go on their website, you could read about that. But each device is different. The customer's needs are different, and we can work with those. We would love to go down that path. Gotcha.
So this person was asking specifically on a non-plastic material.
Okay. Once again, let's connect offline and dig in a little bit more.
Understood.
I'd like to do that.
Okay. Moving on to our next question. How does intellectual property work when there is a degree of co-designing of a device? Does the IP belong to the customer or to the design firm?
100% belongs to our customers. If you're paying for a service, it's 100% their IP. Typically, the only thing that we will ask for is that our engineer's name is on the patent.
Next question. What is your capacity to do design?
Well, once again, it depends on the size of the project. We use some contractors when we need them. We also have engineers out in the bullpen, if you will, working on sustainable products like lean initiative and that kind of thing, so that when a new design project comes in, we have the resources to jump right in. Design is a difficult thing to do because it's cyclical, right? Sometimes you have more work resources, and sometimes you have too much work and not enough resources. So you have to be creative on how you flatten that curve out.
Very good.
That's another thing, depending on the time of the day, let us know what your needs are and we'll let you know if it's a fit.
Very good. Next question. How often does a design project progress to manufacturing?
So that's a good question, Amy. And it varies quite a bit depending on the field of expertise or the device. However, I would say because of our early stage vetting process on what's a good fit for us and what's a good fit for our customers, and we're going to determine that early. And if it's not a good fit for us, we're going to let our customers know early. But generally around 60% is what we see transferring into manufacturing.
Gotcha. Okay. We do have just one more comment. It's kind of going back to the materials side of thing. A few comments on how there are now medical grade recycled materials as well as others, and they're curious as to at this specific company, recycled and non-plastics are used as options. So just curious as to how Nissha handles vetting other materials.
Well, in the long run, right, that's going to come down to the customer because they're the ones that have to get through the FDA. And so if their device, the ISO standard they're going up against, if it's allowed to use a recycled material, then that's going to be on them. I mean, we could offer it as an option. What I've seen for years is a lot of times those recycled options are tough to get through ISO 10993 for biocompatibility. But if it carries that certification, then there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to specify it. Usually we're going to start with a virgin resin because it's cleaner and it carries all the specifications and the traceability and understanding, where the material is coming from. But if there are recycled materials out there now that are vetted through the FDA, then there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to engineer them.
Yeah, and maybe that plastic part is internal to the device that's never going to see a patient. It depends on the device, really. But awesome. I assume that question came out from the current supply chain issues we're having, because that could solve a lot of problems.
Awesome, very good. Well, that wraps up all of our questions that we do have today. So Mark, Dave, thank you once again for your time. Thank you for, everyone for joining us. We will reach out to everybody with the questions and we'll follow up a little bit more in-depthly. But at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Nicole and Massmedic.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, great presentation. Thank you, Mark, Dave, Amy. I think there's a lot of really valuable content in there, especially for, companies that might be earlier stage and startups, which are definitely part of our ecosystem. So if you missed any of this content, if you want to share it, if you want to go back and review, this content will be available on demand and we'll be sending it out to everybody who registered after. And I just want to thank everyone again for joining us today. Thank you to our sponsors, Nissha Medical Technologies, and you can see all of our upcoming events anytime on massmedic.com. Thanks so much. Have a great day.